and welcome back. Now, the same year as US President Nixon announced a peace deal in Vietnam, the first depleted uranium weapons were being used by Israel in the Yom Kippur War. And since then, Israel has only expanded its radioactive arsenal. In the 2006 Israel-Lebanon war, evidence was found of a mysterious radioactive weapon used in highly populated areas. A few years later in the Gaza offensive, the same allegations were made. But the UN-sponsored Goldstone report, while acknowledging such claims, says it did not investigate further. While Israel's use of depleted uranium weapons in Gaza and Lebanon may never be proved, it is now certain that Israel tested a new genotoxic weapon in the Gaza Strip. This is known as the Dense Inert Metal Explosive, or DIME bomb. The bomb explodes in a small area, sending microscopic tungsten particles into the bodies of its victims. The particles, which do not show up on X-rays, cause multiple organ failure and even sever entire limbs. If by some miracle the victims survive, they are almost certain to develop a particularly deadly and untreatable form of cancer called RMS. The DIME bomb is, at this point in time, only used by the United States and Israel. But for the rest of the world, the race to acquire DU weapons is only picking up speed. Russia, France, Belarus, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are only a few countries stocking the weapons. Those with their own uranium enrichment plants are self-sufficient, but those who don't are simply buying them from the USA. And the DU arms race has also come right here to our neighborhood. India now has its own depleted uranium weapons program. And so do we. Pakistan joined the DU club in 2001 with a tank shell modified for use in the T-80 tank, developed for use against Indian tank armor. Pakistani military sources say, however, that unlike NATO and the US, which are fighting transnational wars, Pakistan has never used DU weaponry. In Swat and Waziristan, the only weapons used to bust militant bunkers are the high-explosive anti-tank rounds. The Pakistan military also denies that depleted uranium is used on testing grounds. Just as the world's leading pharmaceutical companies such as Monsanto were behind the production and distribution of Agent Orange in Vietnam, so too are the world's leading defense manufacturers in the forefront of developing depleted uranium weaponry. And backing those companies are some of the world's most powerful banks, leading the international coalition to ban depleted uranium weapons to call for a boycott of those financial institutions that invest in the use of indiscriminate weapons. But how effective is such a move going to be? And can one lone organization stem the global tide towards depleted uranium weapons? Well, joining me from London to hopefully answer those questions is Mr. David Cullen, a senior researcher with the International Coalition to Ban Uranium Weapons. Mr. Cullen, your organization is probably the only one fighting this fight. So far, what kind of success have you had?
Well, we have been successful in getting depleted uranium onto the agenda at the United Nations. We've had two General Assembly resolutions that were passed with sweeping majorities 2007 and 2008. They were just to establish concern amongst countries. We hope this is a process that will begin and will end in an international treaty ban on depleted uranium in weapons, such as there is with landmines and cluster bombs.
But there's some very formidable opposition to this campaign, notably from the United States of America, which of course has taken the lead in developing depleted uranium weapons. So how on earth can you expect to counter that?
Well, there certainly is some. At the moment, they claim that there are no problems with the weapons. Actually, the state of the matter is a lot more complicated than they claim, and there's actually not enough strong evidence, large scientific inquiries that have been done on the ground. So they're kind of hiding behind uncertainties in the science at the moment. We expect there will be resistance, but we also expect that a lot of countries will come on board, and the pressure of being isolated will be sufficient to make countries like the United States eventually come in line with international opinion.
Well, finally, David Cullen, if you talk about the reason for the popularity of DU weapons, I mean, quite apart from their obvious effectiveness at penetrating armor and hardened positions, how much of a factor is it that they simply provide a convenient way to dispose of what would otherwise be a waste product of the uranium enrichment process?
We think that's one of the reasons that it's been chosen as a material, yes. I think they would not necessarily choose it over something that was more effective, but I think the fact that it is a cheap nuclear waste is certainly one of the reasons many countries have decided to buy into it.
So ultimately, all roads lead back to the nuclear weapons industry. But while the threat of an actual nuclear exchange may be distant, we are constantly reminded of the danger of terrorists acquiring either a nuclear weapon or enough materials to set off a dirty bomb. So what then is the real danger? Well, after this break, we'll be joined by nuclear physicist Dr. Parvez Hoodbhoy to discuss just that. Stay tuned.